All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to our YouTube Live for September. Almost forgot the month there. And if you guys are just joining for the first time, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, thank you very much for subscribing to the channel and following our content. As we do every single month, we're going to be going live today. And I've got Christian Perea from the Rideshare Guy. Say hi, Christian.
Hey, everybody.
And I've also got a little special guest today. Some of you guys have been asking for him. So you ready, buddy? All right. So we've got baby Rideshare Guy here, baby George. You paying attention, buddy? He's going to stay on and say hi and make a little cameo. So thanks, everyone, for joining. I see some familiar names in here. Your driver, Mike. Louis, welcome you guys, Anon, Alan, thank you all for joining. As we normally do, we're going to go over some top news stories. There's a couple interesting stories that are broken lately. Hey, George, pay attention right here. Look at the camera. Some of the latest app updates, and which are definitely a couple. The new Uber driver app is rolling out. And then at the end, we're going to do most of the time on a question and answer, ask us anything. So we've got the little baby here. George, you want to say hi? Okay, he's looking at his mommy. Yeah, so Eric says, hi, George. Your trusted servant, Mark, says, cute baby. Everyone says you're a little cutie. And then also, as we always do at the end, hold on, let me try not to drop the baby. We'll do a little book giveaway. So if you guys can make it till the end, we'll go and do a little book giveaway. Actually, Christian, I think this is the first time you've ever seen baby George too, right? What do you think?
I did see baby George on camera. Yeah. What's up, George?
Say hey, buddy. Cool. So
Dan
says, does he have his training wheels yet? No training wheels no training wheels yet, but he does have his own little car, which I think I posted a picture before on the Facebook page. So seems like he's getting a little bored. So we're going to pass him off now and start the session. Thanks, Mom. Say bye, buddy. All right, cool. So just a quick little cameo so you guys know that baby George does exist. And yeah, I want to get started with covering a couple of the top news stories that we've seen. So like I said, we'll cover these top news stories, some of the latest app updates, and then we'll spend probably 45 or 50 minutes answering all your questions. And we'll do a nice little book giveaway at the end of my new book. So definitely stay tuned for that. The first thing I saw that I think is super interesting to drivers is this story. Uber is testing a pilot that would ban riders who fall below 4-star ratings, and it's only in Australia for now, but definitely pretty interesting there. Christian, what do you think about that one?
I think it's been a while because, as most drivers are aware, we've been getting banned if we fall too low on ratings. A little looser recently, but it's good to see like passengers can finally, if you're a bad customer car, I like it.
Yeah, no, I think definitely one of the complaints we've always heard from drivers, and obviously, as you guys know or may not know, that drivers have to maintain a 4.6 rating to stay active on the Uber and Lyft platform, but there's no such requirement for passengers. And so, passengers can go out and be terrible passengers, keep you waiting, eat stuff in your car and do all that, and there's no real recourse. So I definitely like that, Uber and Lyft, or Uber actually for now, is testing this where they would require passengers to have this 4-star rating. So we'll definitely see what happens with that. Let's see. So yeah, we've definitely got a couple good questions coming in. So save the questions for now. You can definitely, we'll get to all those questions and more. Bob says, I'm a rider, not a driver. Is it okay for me to stay? I'm going to say yes, you can definitely stay. Most of the people in here are probably drivers, but we welcome anyone and everyone. So a non-Xer says, it's about time passengers are measured with the same scale as drivers. There are plenty of bad passengers. And yeah, I totally agree. I think that if Uber and Lyft, wouldn't surprise me if Lyft started copying this feature in the future. If they both start doing more features like this, I think it kind of just makes it so you don't always feel so much, at the, you have to do everything that the passenger says or whatever it might be. Your driver, Mike, who's also got a great YouTube channel, he says, if a rider is below 4.0 consistently, they're doing something wrong. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. We saw a story here from Lyft. Lyft rolls out its first electric scooters in Denver. So as you guys know, we've been covering this whole scooter phenomenon and electric bikes. We've got a bunch of content on the YouTube channel about charging for Bird and what that is like. So it's interesting to see Lyft now has its own electric scooters in Denver. We'll see how they hold up in the winter. But Christian, I know you got your first Bird ride with me, right?
Yeah, so seeing Lyft launch scooters in Denver is cool. And I heard that really interesting. Denver is actually encouraging people to ride the scooters on the sidewalk, and that's like really because they're trying to get the riders to ride in the streets. I thought that was really cool. I also noticed that Lyft scooters, yeah, I wonder what's up with that. A bunch of Bird scooters go missing the night before Lyft's launch, or what happened there?
All right, Christian, I'm having a little trouble hearing and seeing you. I don't know if you paid your cable and internet bill this month, but we'll see what if the viewers can hear you guys, I'll let you stay on. But if not, I might kick you off. So we'll see if your internet gets better or not. But you guys let me know if you can hear Christian okay. It's a little choppy for me. I can't really quite hear what you're saying. But I think you said something about Lyft stealing Bird scooters, which I would tend to agree with. If you look at the pictures of Lyft scooters, they actually look just like Bird scooters, but it looks like they kind of just slapped a sticker onto Bird scooters. So that's interesting there. Christian says, looks like Fred says, Christian, you're choppy. Alan says same. And Christian says, blame Comcast. So all right, well, I'm here with AT&T Internet with Los Angeles, so I guess we just kicked Christian off, but hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear. And before we get into the Q&A portion, I do want to talk about a couple latest app updates. So obviously this new Uber driver app was announced with a lot of fanfare 4 or 5 months ago by the CEO in this big event that they had. And it's starting to roll out in more and more places. So I know a bunch of drivers in Los Angeles just got it this week if you didn't already have it. And so I think that it seems like in the next month or two, Uber is going to be rolling out this new driver app. So I'm definitely curious to hear your guys' feedback. I think that, as I've stated in the past, I don't think a new driver app is kind of on the top 5 list or maybe even top 10 list of things that drivers really cared about and wanted changed or fixed. But hey, it is what it is. And now we have a new driver app. And there's definitely some new features that I do think, I think they've made it a lot prettier. The UI is a lot better. You can definitely tell that they did put some thought and care into it. And there are some features that I like the new inbox. So kind of just make it a little easier while you're driving on the road. I don't think it's going to have a big effect on your bottom line, at least to start. But I think definitely, at some point, hopefully they'll add some new features. So I'd be curious to know your feedback about the new Uber driver app. Let's see. Your trusted servant says, I have it in Atlanta. Tony says, I'm pissed that the estimated drive time feature has been eliminated by Lyft. So I think you're referring to obviously the Lyft driver app, but yeah, they were testing a little pilot that Christian just did a good article and video about. If you can share that in the chat, Christian, that would be appreciated. But basically Lyft was testing this feature that allowed you to see the distance, right? So obviously how far away the rider is when you pick them up, but Lyft was also testing this pilot in a few cities where they would tell you where the rider, or basically, how far the rider was going. So they were going to say, hey, it's 5 minutes to get to this passenger, just like normal. And then they would say, and once you get there, it's going to be a 20-minute ride. And you would see all that on the acceptance screen. So that was a cool thing that, I think they were testing, but they did get rid of. And I hope that they bring it back. It kind of sucks when they test these new features and then they get rid of them, because obviously it's kind of like giving us a little taste of it and then they take it away, which I think obviously sucks. But we'll see what happens with that. Sam says the Uber driver app is okay for now. So I'd love to hear if you're on the new driver app and, maybe what you like, what you don't like. Creekside says, love it. And Todd says, definitely improvement. Jay says, I have it here in Pennsylvania. FS Winchester says it's been in Houston for 2 weeks. So yeah, definitely, I would say for the most part, the new driver app is not a bad thing. It's not a bad redesign. They definitely improved a lot of aspects, and we'll have a bunch of content about that coming out in the future. So you guys can check that out. And then the other thing that I want to mention that I think is pretty interesting Lyft actually made a rate change in, I believe, 4 or 5 cities to kind of be more like Uber. So if you guys remember from, I believe it was a few months ago in July, I've got the blog post right here. Basically, Uber lowered the mileage rate in some cities and upped the time rate in a few other cities. And so basically it took Lyft a while to copy them this time. Usually they're a lot quicker to copy Uber, but this time they copied them. And the cities were Dallas, Houston, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Minneapolis. So it was an interesting development. Basically, you know, to kind of give you guys an example, in Minneapolis, they upped the time rate by 63% and they lowered the distance rate by 19%. So if you guys are in one of those cities, it already happened to you on Uber. And if you're in one of those cities, you just got a notification last week that was happening on Lyft. So that's definitely interesting. You know, I think it sort of is like going to basically pay you, as you might imagine, more for the trips, you know, in traffic and less for the 70-mile-an-hour trips on the freeway, which, you know, I guess take it or leave it. But that's sort of what's changing. So yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. Delivery Guru says, I've had the new app here in Atlanta since June, and mine shows an estimated time for the new trip. Yeah, so that's another feature that Uber is testing. Uber is testing that feature just like Lyft was. Let's see. Anon is in Miami, and he says that the new app is live. Matt Balloon says, I'm no longer the only Uber driver with a karaoke machine. Okay, that's cool. So let's see, what do we got here? Just making sure this is running. All right, perfect. And let's see, Lyft already made a change to accommodate ride requests for 100% electric cars, range estimates prior to accepting ride requests. I'm not familiar with that, but I haven't heard of that. So yeah, you know, like I said, you know, wanted to cover a couple of the latest app updates, some breaking news, and now we'll spend the rest of the 45 minutes for this session going over all your top questions and answers. You know, hopefully I'll have the answers for you guys. And of course, stay tuned at the end. We'll be giving out a few copies of my new book. If anyone if anyone's won one of the books or one of the hats that we've given out in the past, feel free to chime in so you guys know that I actually send them out. And, you know, one thing that I want to mention real quick before we get into the Q&A is that it's a new company that's actually sponsoring the channel. They're called Rideshare Night. You guys may have heard me mention them because they're one of the first companies to actually offer rideshare drivers extended warranties and service contracts for your vehicle. So if you've noticed, you know, most regular extended car and manufacturer warranties, they actually won't cover your vehicle for commercial use, like if you're driving for Uber and Lyft. And even if they did, you'd probably go above the mileage limit super quick. So if you want a warranty that will kind of cover that $5,000 blown transmission, Rideshare Night offers just that. They've got 0% financing, monthly payments for their vehicle service contracts. It's also available to most drivers depending on your vehicle, not based on credit. They're not available in California yet, but I believe they are in every other state. So lots of good coverage, and the monthly payments, you know, are around, I think they advertise as low as $36 a month. I've seen an average of around $70 a month, might be more typical. And you can actually take your vehicle to any licensed mechanic or dealership service department to fix your car. So lots of options. You guys can head to ridesharenight.com. Christian will leave a link in the chat and the description if you're not watching live right now, so you can sign up. All right. Thank you guys, Rideshare Night, for paying the bills. And now back to the Q&A. So see a lot of good questions. First, I should definitely give a big thanks to Greg for the nice little tip that you left on Super Chat. Greg, of course, if you have a question, now that you're the first one to tip, I'll definitely answer that. And yeah, so let's see. We've got a Postmates question to start. Diana says, new Postmates driver in Mesa, Arizona, wondering if they have a way to see where the delivery is going before accepting the offer. And yes, they do. So what a lot of Postmates drivers will do is they'll actually switch over to the scooter option or the bicycle option if it's available in your city. And so they sort of set that as the vehicle. And then when you do that, you can see a lot more information, basically, you know, like sort of the order value and where it's headed. I can't remember the specifics, but if we've got a Postmates delivery driver in here who does that, they can probably chime in on the specifics. But that's sort of the loophole. I mean, I don't know, it may even be kind of pushing the limits of the gray area. But on DoorDash, for example, I know you can see all of that information. We've got a ton of really good information on DoorDash that I'm going to pull up right here for you guys on the blog, on the rideshareguy.com. We've got what we call our delivery specialist. His name is Dash Bridges, and I'll leave that link right now in the chat, which you guys can take a look at. And of course, if you're not watching live, you won't be able to answer questions, but YouTube does allow you now to see a live replay or a replay of the live chat. And so you can see these links that I'm talking about, see the questions that are being asked. And I definitely recommend, if you are interested in driving for DoorDash, that's one thing that we hear a lot from delivery drivers, is that DoorDash does give you more information, so you can kind of be a little more selective, and you start to really, if you're just taking every job and you don't care, it doesn't really matter. But if you do kind of think about the order value and which restaurants and potentially how far you're going, DoorDash is definitely a good job for that. So Nina says, as far as Rideshare Night, I spoke to someone there, but they told me you would have to pay for the repairs and then they reimburse you. Is that correct? So that's a good question, Christian. I believe you can confirm this for Rideshare Night, but I do believe that's true. So you would have to pay for it and then they'll reimburse you. Let me check on that. We'll get the actual answer for you in a second. Let's see, Lloyd says, is Dynamic, I guess sticking on delivery theme, he says, is Dynamex a recommended app? Are there reasons not to use it? I think he says Dynamic, but I think you mean Dynamex, which is actually a third-party delivery service for Amazon. And basically, when you order an Amazon Prime package, sometimes UPS delivers it, sometimes OnTrack delivers it, sometimes Dynamex delivers it. And so what that means is that basically Dynamex is a company. I'm going to share a link to an article we wrote actually from one of our contributors. And basically, Dynamex is a company that delivers Amazon packages. So it's similar to other package delivery jobs like Amazon Flex, but it's sort of, Amazon uses Amazon Flex drivers. They use third-party contractors like Dynamex. And so you are still an independent contractor, but, it's just a little bit different setup. So I just shared a link where you can try and, or you can read up and learn a little bit more. Christian says, usually a company like Rideshare Night will pay directly to the mechanic or the dealership. Yeah, so I think we'll double check on that one for you. That's a good question though, and see, I'm hoping that they actually pay directly to the dealership. If you get one of these warranties with Rideshare Night, I'm hoping that they pay directly to the dealership, so that way, if you're out $2,000 or $3,000, you don't have to float that money, even if you eventually get it back. So let's see. Sam says, this is a good question. Sam says, don't you think scooters are reducing our short trips? And I would say, yes, I definitely think that. And I think Uber has even released data in the past week that says jump trips are replacing some of Uber trips and then some. So basically what that's saying is in San Francisco, where Uber has obviously UberX, but also now they've got these jump electric bikes, Uber's data is, according to them, it's showing that they're doing less short trips, but more e-bike trips, right? So not, let's say they did like 100, or let's say they did 1,000 short trips, whatever they call those, probably a mile or less last week. Now they're saying that it's 1,150, for example, bike trips this week. So on Uber's end, it seems like they're replacing some of those short trips. And I don't know that this is necessarily a bad thing for drivers. This is a good question for the audience. I'd love to know from you guys, what do you think about these scooters and e-bikes that are definitely going to eventually eat into the short trips for Uber and Lyft drivers? Now, if you're on a trip-based bonus like an Uber Quest or something like that, where you want to do a bunch of short trips in a short amount of time, or basically as short amount of time as possible to get that bonus as quick as possible, yeah, I guess eating into your short trips is going to cost you money. But I also think that Uber will sort of change their bonus systems accordingly. Maybe they'll make less, they'll make the requirements less trips. To kind of make up for that fact. So I don't know. I don't really see the scooters and bikes eating into driver short trips as a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing, right? Because, on a short trip, let's say it's $7 charged to the passenger, Uber takes their $2 or $2.50 fee right off the top. So let's say it's $2.50, you're now left with $4.50, and then they take their 25% commission. So what's that leave you? 4.5 times 0.75, that leaves you with $3.37 on a $7 fare. So they're taking more than 50% on a $7 minimum fare to the passenger, right? So their commission is like 55%. I think that, those are kind of rides I'm okay with not giving those rides. I'd be curious to know from you, your driver, Mike. I know he's done a bunch of charging and juicing. Mike, your driver, Mike's actually already kind of juiced in real life, or jacked, I guess you would say. And he says, absolutely. James says, I think scooters clogged up the sidewalks. City of Fresno banned them this past week. Yeah, that's sort of a separate issue. But Glenn says, first time on, been driving for 10 months. Welcome, Glenn. Feel free to take a look and start asking some questions. Sam says, yes, I agree. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff there. Let's see, we've got Daniel. He's got a question here. He says, I rented a BMW 5 Series on Turo for $824 for 3 weeks in Arizona. Can you go over the daily mileage allotment? A rental car was $10.50. By the way, I love your channel and want to keep in touch. Well, this is a great way to keep in touch with me on these YouTube lives, because you got me here live and, in the flesh. You can always email me too. But for the most part, definitely we hear a lot of interest about Turo, which is a peer-to-peer car rental service. Now, you can't rent cars from Turo to drive for Uber and Lyft, but we have seen partnerships in the past, like Get Around is another peer-to-peer rental car company. And I know Christian tried renting one of their cars for $5 an hour in San Francisco. And since that was a special partnership, he could drive for Uber and Lyft. But where it gets interesting for a lot of rideshare drivers is that you can actually list your car on Turo. Let's say you're not going to drive for a week, or let's say you want to make some side money, and you can rent it out to someone like Daniel. And it sounds like Daniel rented someone's BMW 5 Series for $824 for 3 weeks, which seems like a pretty good deal for a rental car. And yeah, I mean, if you go over the daily mileage allotment, then basically what happens is you can request more miles with Turo and they'll charge you. So yeah, you just have to sort of work it out with the owner and send it to him that way. So yeah, definitely something you can do, but you'll have to pay for it. Robert says minimum fare in Kansas City is equals $2.66 to the driver. Yeah, so I mean, minimum fares kind of suck, right? I always tell people, in my book, actually, we've got a whole section on avoiding the short trips, right? When you get into those bar areas where people are just taking little short bar trips, I mean, flip your app off and leave, right? You want to come back. You want the bar trips at the end of the night when it's surging and when people are going 10, 15 minutes or 10, 15 miles back home, right? During, certain times when, let's say you're, and this, of course, if you're not on a trip-based bonus like Uber Quest, you really want to avoid those short trips, right? I mean, $2.66 for a minimum fare, you have to think about, right, the time you're waiting. Let's say it takes 2 or 3 minutes or even 5 minutes waiting for a passenger, 5 minutes driving to a passenger, and then 10 minutes to drive that passenger to their destination. You made $2.66 for 20 minutes worth of work. Your hourly earnings are going to be pretty low if you start stacking together a bunch of minimum fares. And that's why typically I always tell drivers to really think about ways they can avoid those minimum fares. And, flipping your app off in like a bar area at 10 p.m. is definitely a good way to do that. So definitely keep that in mind. So we've got some great questions coming in. Let's see. Pamela says, new driver. Welcome, Pamela. And she says, when I cancel a trip and choose don't charge the passenger, can they still rate me? So I believe that they cannot rate you, because if you're in that situation where you accept it and then cancel it immediately, they can't usually rate you unless the trip is started. If a trip begins, then you can, the passenger can always rate you. I think if you start the trip though and don't move and then cancel the trip that way, it may work that, they wouldn't be able to rate you. But for the most part, just to answer your question, when you start a trip, the trip is now started. And no matter what you do after that, the passenger is going to get to rate you. But if it's sort of some weird situation where, you had to kick them out of the car because, they're behaving like, jackass, then you can always contact Uber and let them know what happened and say that you're expecting a bad rating, and hopefully they'll remove it that way. But, for the most part, I would say that, everyone gets those, sort of sticky situations, the bad ratings, the bad passengers. It's just sort of, kind of preventing it in the first place, proactively doing what you can to prevent those types of riders. So Kelsey says, I rent my trucks on Turo. here in Colombia. Well, I'd love to know about your experience, Kelsey. If you guys are thinking about, if you guys are thinking about renting your cars on Turo or one of these other platforms, in general, one thing I would say with all these platforms is assume for the worst case scenario. So don't stick your car onto Turo and just assume that, oh yeah, everything will be great. They're going to return it all clean and it's going to be fine, right? Assume that the passenger is going to get into an accident. And what's going to happen in that situation, right? Assume that someone might steal your car. How are you going to get that car back? Do you want to rely on Turo and the police? Or do you want to purchase like a cheap $30, $50 GPS unit that you can put on your own car and go find it yourself and bring the police with you, right? Just kind of have that mindset, because I think that's what we hear most often with a lot of these services is when they work great. But that one time where a driver gets screwed, right? They're sort of like, oh, I can't believe this happened. And you guys have to understand that, as a driver or a Turo, renting your car out on Turo, you're basically running a mini business. And these are the things you sort of need to think about. So Bob says, no, if a trip is canceled by driver, I can't rate. And that's correct. Definitely. So basically, I think there's we might be talking about a little bit different things, right? If a driver accepts a request and then cancels it, a passenger can't rate it. But if you start the trip, I believe almost always then, if you get to their destination and start the trip, then I believe almost then always the passenger can rate you at that point. So hopefully that answers that. William says, can I see where the address is while the ping is going off? No, so it only shows you sort of that general location. But as you guys may or may not know, we had a really good video about this on Lyft. One of the things I like about Lyft is that you accept the trip request on Lyft, and as you're driving up to the rider's basically pickup point, Lyft tells you where that ride is headed. And this is another thing that I talk about. Jay on the YouTube channel talks about this a lot, but sort of selectively, there may be times where you need to kind of be a little bit cutthroat and selectively cancel that request. If you see the passengers, let's say, headed an hour outside of town, and it's going to take you 2 or 3 hours to come back in traffic. This isn't something that I would do all the time. And probably if you did do it too frequently, Lyft would deactivate you for doing so. But definitely kind of have to think about, right, hey, what is most important to you? Is it, trying to maximize your earnings, providing the best experience to your passengers, and finding that middle ground for your personal situation. All right, so I'm doing a lot of talking since Christian had to bail, but still going strong, and we're about halfway through. So big thanks to everyone who's joining. We're up close to 100 people watching live, which is awesome. And like I said, we do these YouTube lives every single month. So if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel yet, definitely go ahead and click that subscribe button, turn notifications on, so you'll actually get a notification every time we go live. And then if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, or leave a question in the chat if you're watching live. Alan has a good question. He says, don't you get tired of the same questions over and over again? Well, so I've been doing these YouTube lives for about 1.5 years, and frankly, a lot of similar questions do come in, but every single time, I'm looking at 10 questions right here, and I sort of pick and choose new questions that I've never seen before. So no one in 1.5 years of doing YouTube lives, no one ever has, I don't think anyone has ever asked me about Turo, or if they have, I forgot, but that's something that I know a lot about as a customer, as someone I've interviewed a bunch of people who are renting their cars out on Turo, and I've learned a lot from that. So I guess I would say I don't get tired of seeing the same questions over and over, because I'm always looking for new and interesting questions to answer. So hopefully you've got an interesting question for me, Alan. Let's see. Okay. Pamela says, I haven't been driving past dark because it's so hard to see addresses. Any tips or tricks to overcome this? So I think this is definitely an issue I've experienced myself too. I've heard of some drivers actually carrying like a mag light, flashlight, and when you get close to the address and it's hard to see because there's not good street lights or whatever, they kind of shine it quickly. Me personally, I just use the GPS, and I'm very comfortable with the GPS and with navigation. And the reason why that is because I practice. I actually don't, when I was first getting started as an Uber or Lyft driver, it kind of sounds a little bit silly to say this now, but I would practice, right? I would listen to the audio, and it would say, okay, you're going to make a left turn in 300 feet. And I would look at how fast I was going and sort of approximate, okay, I'm going 30 miles an hour. It usually takes me a couple seconds to go 300 feet, and get that in my head, right? If you're relying too heavily on the GPS, you're never going to be able to do stuff like that. You're always going to, when you're looking at the map, for example, example, it's going to be hard for you to decipher those addresses. But I know I guess I'm just thinking about it, right? I know that if I'm using Google Maps and I see it switch over to the Uber driver app as I'm pulling up, I'll count the number of houses real quick, right? If I'm 5 houses away or 5 apartment buildings away, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can usually almost always get it like kind of like plus or minus 1 house. Just doing that alone. So I don't even actually use. I don't even actually use addresses that often, but I guess that's what I would say is sort of just, practice definitely, makes you better. And it sounds a little silly, but, that's what works. So let's see. Lloyd says, I use Google Maps and put it on satellite so that I could see the actual house. Yep, that's definitely a good tip. Kelly says, thanks for this, and you are welcome, Kelly. Bob says, occasionally I get a brand new driver, and Bob is a passenger, so he says, I get a brand new driver. After the trip, I want a tip, but the rider app tells me that the driver has not turned on tips. Can't you get Uber to default it on? Now, that would be a pretty smart idea. Uber should turn tips on by default, but I think what's happening is you have to agree to a special service agreement in order to receive tips as an Uber driver. So for whatever reason, it sounds like drivers are allowed to sign up with Uber, but they still have like one more document to accept. So hopefully Uber will fix that in the future and make that part of the onboarding process, because it seems a little silly for sure. I agree. Let's see. Dan says, get a 4 to 5 cell Maglite, great defensive tool too. I used one for 21 plus years now at night. So look, I guess I'm not the only one using a Maglite. This is actually, I bought a nice Maglite recently because I've been doing a lot of the bird charging too, and finding those bird scooters at night. It's a lot easier when you have the Maglite. And if you guys are doing a good job too, don't forget that all of these purchases, if let's say you're using this flashlight 100% for business, or let's say it's 90% for business, you get to take a 90% deduction on that. So if your Maglite costs you 30, 40 bucks, you get to deduct whatever percentage of time you use it for the business. So make sure you guys are doing a good job of tracking your miles first and foremost, but also all of your expenses, because things like that, when you really start thinking about it, there's a lot that, maybe you just keep a flashlight around in the house and you only use it, once a year when there's, like a power outage, but 99% of the time you're using it for your business. Now you get to take that full deduction for something you would have bought anyways, or you get to take 99% of the deduction for something you would have bought anyway. So those are always things that I'm looking out for as a business owner. And, sort of speaking of business owners, I think this question is interesting. Air Attackers says, what is the proper way to ask for arbitration from the rideshare company? So whether you're a passenger or a driver, and let's say you get into some type of issue, of basically a legal issue with the company, you think that you're an employee, or you basically want to sue them, you're not actually allowed to sue them because of the agreement you sign as a passenger and a driver. And it's not just Uber. A lot of these tech companies, a lot of these on-demand companies require forced arbitration. And this is basically to prevent a bunch of drivers getting together and doing a class action, which can potentially cost the companies a lot of money. And that's a whole separate discussion. But for the most part, I don't know the answer to this, Air Attackers, but my guess would be that you do need to reach out to the company. And I would think that you could do it through their normal channels. So if you're a driver, you can go to help.uber.com, or you can go into a Greenlight Center and submit a request that says, hey, I want to go into I want to go into arbitration with Uber. And I'm sure there's paperwork. I mean, typically most people do this with a lawyer. I don't know if you can actually, I'm sure you could, but you probably have to read up on it and really figure it out. I think what may be a better option is if you're having some type of issue with Uber. Let's say they owe you $1,000 for some payment that you feel that they didn't pay you. You can always research how to write a demand letter online, and the demand letter is sort of the first step. When you send that to Uber, for example, like that's what you would send, and their lawyer will have to review it. And typically, what you want, if you're having issues with any of these companies, you want their lawyers to have to review documents, because that's going to cost them money. And oftentimes they're just gonna be like, all right, let's just pay this guy because we don't want to pay our lawyers $1,000 an hour just to, over a $500 or $1,000 claim. And, of course, if you do have a friend that's a lawyer or something like that, talk to them about getting a demand letter written. Because I've actually had to do this with some companies that I've worked with here on the Rideshare Guy. Some advertisers, I'm not gonna name any names of people that didn't pay me. And that always kind of scared them into paying me, because it sort of shows that you're serious. So Hopefully that helps. Christian says, cool podcast, how to sue Uber. You know what? I actually really like that idea. I think I'm going to write that down. It would be fun to do a podcast on how to sue Uber and Lyft. So I'm going to take that down as a note. And if you guys know of anyone that can help me figure that out, I think there's actually a few options. I really like that idea. I'm not going to lie. So let's see. Nina says, what is the best mileage tracker? With most, I forget to turn on and off when picking up and dropping passengers. So the first part of your question, I would say, is what I've found is Stride Tax is a great option. It's a free mileage tracker for Android and iOS. I'll go ahead and leave a link here in the show notes. I believe our link is Stride. Let me see if that works. No. Let's try one more. If this works. There we go. Okay, so I'll leave a link to this is our affiliate link for Stride Tax, and basically you can download their free mileage tracking app, and it also does expenses. So if you buy that flashlight, you can also put it there, and they've got a cool features where it's either start and stop. So to answer the second part of your question, when I leave the house, I turn on my mileage tracking app, and when I get home, I turn it off, right? So I deduct all the miles from the second I leave my house to when I get home, especially if you're a driver who's using destination filter. I almost always use destination filter at the end of the night. So even if I don't get a ride home, I definitely consider that for myself, that I'm working and I'm driving. And I think there's some, maybe a little argument here with some CPAs and who you talk to, but I think for the most part, most people agree these days, most of the CPAs I've talked to agree these days that, what I do is okay. Obviously, everyone's situation is unique, but that's sort of what I do to give you guys a little bit of an idea there. So Air Attacker says, have you ever considered doing a podcast on how to properly ask for arbitration? No, but I do know, I have had the lawyer, Shannon Liss Reardon, who's suing all of these companies on my podcast. She may be a good person to talk to about that. Let's see. Stan says, I have a question about taxes. I hear you can only do miles or expenses, but you cannot do both. Is that true? So Christian, I know we've got a great guest post on this from one of our advertising partners, Intuit QuickBooks. If you want to share that, but basically what he's talking about is actual expenses versus a standard mileage deduction. So I said earlier, right, make sure you track your miles. Now, if you take the standard mileage deduction, that mileage is important. But actually what I recommend is if you're thinking that actual expenses may be better, and this is really, I would say 90% of drivers are going to want to go with standard mileage deduction since, as a rideshare driver, believe it or not, you're putting so many miles on your car. And typically that's going to work out a lot better because you get a 53 or 54 cent per mile deduction. And most cars cost much less than that to operate. So that typically works out better. But let's say you're driving Uber Select and you've got an expensive, German-made car that needs a bunch of maintenance and service. You can also do actual expense method. And the best way I've found to compare the two is with QuickBooks Self-Employed. So basically, this is a paid service, and they have advertised on the site before, but QuickBooks Self-Employed allows you to track all of your miles, but it also allows you to track all of your expenses. And then at the end of the year, you just log on to QuickBooks Self-Employed and it compares the two and tells you which one will get you the bigger deduction. So that is definitely the best way to handle that. So for example, we just got a 2012 BMW X5. I bought it off of my mom. And so that's what we're going to do at the end of the year. I'm going to be using this car for Uber Select, but I'm also tracking all of my expenses now, and I'm going to see what's going to give me a better deduction, the actual expense method or the standard mileage method, and sort of see what's better there. So let's see. Christian, make sure you go ahead and share that link. Let's see. Dan T says, would a demand letter work on an insurance company? I think it can't hurt. Definitely can't hurt. Brett says, why doesn't the Uber app track miles? So the Uber does send you a report of your miles at the end of the year. And I haven't looked at it in a while because, I haven't looked at it since tax time, but I believe they send you a report with your on trip and online miles, right? So basically all the miles that you're online, and they break it down to give you miles that you're with a passenger, but they don't include, let's say time that you're driving around with the app off or driving to or from, your house, if you're deducting those miles. So you definitely want to independently track it. And then of course, if you're also driving for Lyft, there may be times where, you've got miles on Lyft where you're online with both Lyft and Uber. So I found that it's just much easier to track miles on your own, either with a free app like Stride, or if you want to have a little bit more options, you can use a QuickBooks Self-Employed, or if you're old school, you can always just track it with a pen and paper or a simple spreadsheet. Just make sure that you're very diligent about it and you start and stop every night. That would never work for me because I would always forget, but that definitely works. So Ryan says Stride tax is great, very accurate mileage from and to home. Yeah, I use Stride and I haven't had any problems. I like QuickBooks Self-Employed too. So definitely make sure you're using something, I guess I would say. That would work. Brett says the whole point of my question was, why doesn't Uber track dead miles? Well, I think I sort of answered that. Let's see. Dan says, Liz is number one. She's awesome. Ask her if she would give you 1% of settlement by every driver recommended by Harry. Give us a promo code so I can refer you to the lawyer who's suing Uber and Lyft. That might be a good idea. We can talk about that later. So lots of questions on mileage tracking. Hopefully that answered all your guys' questions. Okay, Sam says, there are cities with heavy traffic, Uber drivers facing nightmares every single day. Why is Uber not considering as difficult driving and a gas price hike for fare increases? So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we've got an article about driving, you're sort of like basically gas prices increasing. And so I know that Lyft partnered with Shell, and they've had this partnership where they're offering rewards to drivers, and they tripled the benefits for the summer. So I think that Lyft has done at least something. If you don't use Shell, or if you get cheaper gas at Arco or Costco or something like that, or have a rewards card, this may not apply to you. But I like that Lyft is at least recognizing that, hey, gas is getting up there, it's expensive, and we're going to at least try to do something. Whereas Uber has sort of said, hey, you're on your own when it comes to gas prices. I don't know. I think this is one thing that Uber has really missed the boat on this, and I brought it up many times. So it's clear that they're not listening to me on that one. But hopefully they will do something, because I think that gas prices are always fluctuating, but I think really what the companies like Uber and Lyft need to do is at least acknowledge it, right? Because I've gotten so many questions from drivers about, hey, what about, raising gas prices? What can we do? And here you have Uber, who's not even saying anything. At least Lyft has gone out and, tried to do something and tried to improve that for drivers. So hopefully that will change and we can see something there, some action there. Alan says he likes Chevron. I'm trying to think. Honestly, I use Gas Buddy a lot, and I typically fill up, either at the 76 by my house because it tends to be pretty cheap, or I'll use Gas Buddy to find a really cheap gas station nearby and, just do it that way. So I'm going to share a link right now to an article Christian posted about a new partnership between Gas Buddy and Shop Your Way. And there's actually some cool ones they've got going on that basically pay you for the Uber drives. And if you're an Uber ride, so if you're a driver or rider, if you link your Shop Your Way, sign up and link your Shop Your Way account to Uber, you can get a bunch of rewards points, and it's pretty cool. I actually just bought a washer and dryer for my place, and I got $100 off of the washer and dryer from Sears because of all the points I've been racking up driving. So I think that's definitely a cool kind of easy money. It's not cash back, but it does get you money off at Sears or Kmart, which yes, they are still in business. If you're wondering that question. Christian says 15 cents a gallon in Shop Your Way points. So definitely a good deal there. And let's see, I saw some good questions. So Vincent says, what are the best areas in Los Angeles to wait for Select and Lux rides? So I'm excited because I actually got this Select vehicle recently, and I'm going to be driving in Los Angeles Uber Select for the first time. So I've sort of already been scoping out some areas and thinking about it and strategizing it. And of course, I've talked to a lot of drivers who are doing it. But I mean, as you might imagine, Uber Select, it is 2 to 3 times the cost of an Uber. So it's not going to be the same type of clientele and the exact same times, but I think that we've definitely seen, I know Christian told me when he did Uber Select, Friday, Saturday nights were popular. It was sort of people, like on going out to dates. So, sort of the dinner times around Friday, Saturday nights, but then also at the end of the night, guys trying to impress girls, things like that. And, some people sort of opting during high surge times. Uber Select is about the same price, 2 to 3x surge on UberX is the same as Uber Select, and some people will see that and they might as well order an Uber Select at that time. And then of course the business travelers who are expensing it, they don't care, they might as well take an Uber Select. I think that's like kind of a good middle ground. When you're expensing it, you don't feel too bad for taking a nicer ride because it's not Uber Black, but hey, someone else is paying for it, so you do want a nicer ride. Nina says, I got a recumbent bike for free with my points from Shop Your Way. So that's awesome. Hopefully you heard about it on our site. Christian says, I got a flannel and some jeans at Sears. So it sounds like Christian is stocking up his wardrobe. Yeah, and honestly, I feel like with this Shop Your Way partnership, I think a lot of people maybe were skeptical. It's like, wait, we get free money for doing stuff we already do, and yes, you do. So take advantage of it while you can. Let's say James says, Christian, your ISP doesn't want you to stream the rideshare guy or be a moderator. I think that might be due to net neutrality, maybe. Let's see. I think Dan is talking about electric cars here. I'm not sure if there's a question there, but feel free to let me know. Ricardo says, why did Uber stop with the gas card? So Uber did used to offer this gas card, and I think it's because they came out with their new credit card. So Uber came out with their new credit card, and I think that's when they got rid of the gas card at that point. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I can't quite remember, but there's definitely a lot of options. They had that fuel card. I think. It was when they launched the debit card, right? I think that's when Uber launched this new debit card. Let me leave a link. We wrote a blog post about it, and you guys can check it out. But gas is sort of a part of that. So, I mean, I think we kind of, the debit card is a little bit better than the fuel card, a little more flexible. So I believe that's why Uber got rid of the fuel card, but they did replace it with a debit card that's only for drivers. And frankly, I think there are a lot of options out there when it comes to gas. I mean, you can find really good credit cards that earn rewards on gas. You could fill up at Costco. The trick filling up at Costco is don't go on the weekends, go sort of on the weekdays, but after rush hour. So, everybody goes to Costco on the weekdays from like 7 to 10 a.m. Go, during the middle of the day, basically, or a little bit later. You can definitely get hooked up that way and, be in and out. So let's see. James says, I also got plenty of summer clothes from Shop Your Way. Awesome. And you get 50% oil changes at Sears Auto. Yeah, I'm telling you, this is a pretty good program. Good free stuff. Marcus says, are there any topics for driving in Atlanta? Well, I've never driven personally in Atlanta, but I think if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and I can do my best. I won't be able to give you specific insight into the best venues, for example, in Atlanta, but I can definitely talk about the general trends. I think that's a good question. We hear from a lot of people. Sometimes people complain that too much of our content is California based, but I mean, really what we're trying to highlight and show, it doesn't matter what city you're in, right? If you want to be one of the top drivers in your city, you want to learn from the top drivers in other cities. So if you're not, let's say you're in, the middle, you're in Atlanta, for example, you're not going to be able to earn as much as a driver in San Francisco, but I guarantee there are a lot of things that drivers in San Francisco are doing that you're doing. There's traffic in both cities, right? There's pro football teams, there's pro basketball teams. There's, people going to and from work. Atlanta has is the biggest airport in the US, I believe. SFO is a huge airport, right? So there's sort of a lot of parallels. I wouldn't get too caught up on the local stuff, sort of like that type of information. You really don't need it, to be honest, I think, to be successful as a driver. Sam says, are you recommending the optional insurance policy deducting from every ride? So I believe that you're talking about the driver injury protection plan. So what this is, I'm going to pull up an article we wrote about it. And basically, this is a program. I don't know if you guys noticed, in the past, they launched it originally in October of 2017. And Uber actually raised the per mile rate by 5 cents, or, I guess it was 3 cents to the driver. And they basically did this for driver injury protection insurance. And so it's in a bunch of states now: Alabama, California, Nevada, Illinois, Georgia. It's almost in every state, I think, like close to 30 or 40 states, if it's not everywhere by now. And basically what it is if you opt into this program and you're injured or hurt on the job, you'll have your medical expenses covered, with an earnings reimbursement of up to $500 a week, depending on your pay history, right? So if you never drove, you're not going to get $500 a week, but if you always drove and made $500 a week, you would get that, and it's up to $1 million in protection. I think it can be pretty valuable for a full-time driver. Driving is obviously an inherently dangerous job. And so I think it is important to kind of understand these insurance products and sort of, what's available out there, and are really kind of, just understanding that there's a product available, doing your research. And I just left a link in the show notes where you guys can learn about this driver injury protection plan and what is the downside if I don't accept this, right? Assume, like I said earlier, right? Assume that if you get into an accident, what's going to happen? Would that devastate you financially and you would be living on the streets the next week? If so, you should probably get this insurance plan and maybe sacrifice a few pennies here and there, so that situation doesn't happen. But if you can go a couple weeks, or you have medical insurance and you can, get coverage that way, then maybe you don't need to worry as much. So definitely, that's something you can take care of. Marcus says, I make at least $175 a day in Atlanta. He says, concerts are a waste of time for me, no money in traffic, and I only drive Lyft. So that's actually great tips. One thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is that it seems like the strategies have changed a lot in the past few years. When I first started driving, it was all about the big events, because that's where you could get the surge pricing. And, I think Uber and Lyft weren't huge yet, though, and there were a lot of people, but there weren't like 50,000 people. And now, when you're at the airport, or when you're at a sporting event or a concert, it just doesn't seem worth it anymore to sit in, at the airport, for example. Like I'll drop people off at the airport these days, but I don't even remember the last time I waited in the lot. If I get a rematch before I leave the airport, where Uber matches with you with a passenger right after you drop off a passenger, that's great. Of course, I'll take that. But I never go back to the waiting lot anymore, because it seems like it's always full in LA, but also sometimes it takes 20 minutes to get into just a Terminal 1 in LAX, the first terminal, and then another 10 or 20 minutes to get to your passenger, and then another 10 or 20 minutes to get out of the terminal. You might spend an hour at the airport going half a mile. And, you can basically pick up a bunch of short to medium rides in that time, and I think make more money. So I think definitely understanding, how that works in your city, right? If you're able to find those sort of more medium events where there's a lot of people and there's surge pricing, but it's not a total nightmare and a cluster to get in and out, that's really where you can start to make some more money, and sort of do well. So I'd be curious to know, what you guys think about that. Steven says, I only take bingos at the airport. I don't know what a bingo is, but feel free to enlighten me. And Sam says, I never ever am in the, caught dead in the waiting lot in LAX. So I think we're on the same page, Sam. Steven says, sorry, I'm late. No worries, Steven. We're still here, but only for another 5 minutes. So we're going to go 5 more minutes and we'll do the book giveaway. So if you guys have made it till now, you might as well stick it out 5 more minutes and enter for a chance to win. We'll give out 3 copies of my new book tonight, and it'll be pretty easy to enter to win. So let's see. It looks like Alan says, Marcus, I agree. Concerts are a waste of time. And Steven says, a bingo is a cab word. And Ron says, not all airports are as busy as LAX. So that's a great point. And that's sort of exactly what I said, right? When you every city might have an airport, but at the same time, there are times where LAX, I will go and wait in the lot when it's sort of off peak. Sunday nights are crazy at LAX though, and there will be like an hour of traffic just to get to a passenger and get out of the terminal. And that is not a good situation for a driver, plus all the waiting time in the queue. So I would avoid that at all costs. But, there are definitely times where it does make sense to do those airport rides. And so even if you're at an airport that isn't as busy as LAX, maybe peak time at your airport in a smaller to medium size, like maybe that's the ideal time, right? You can sort of see that there's patterns for every city. Every city has an airport, but you need to shift your driving style kind of accordingly if you're really thinking about ways to maximize your earnings. And, hopefully I'm not making it seem too complicated, but I mean, basically it's avoid, LAX on Sunday nights. That's sort of, avoid LAX on Friday when everyone's going out of town. Monday, there's like certain times. It gets pretty obvious, if you kind of think about these things logically. So Kelsey says, Atlanta is the busiest airport in the world. Yeah. That is definitely makes sense. I know it's a big one. So I've actually never been to it, but maybe one day. Jay Fred says, Pamela, I'm driving in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area part-time, not making a lot yet, still learning. Concerts are good here because the stadium nearby isn't huge, but enough people that it surges for rides. So one other strategy that I love using around concerts and venues is, they've got these designated pickup and drop-off points. Stay away from those, right? At Dodger Stadium here in LA, I would never want to go and sit there and then pick people up and then wait to get out. But there are a lot of pretty savvy Uber and Lyft customers, and what some of them will do is actually walk outside the stadium and then drop their pin on a side street. So here in LA, for example, where it works really well here in LA, we've got all these different stadiums, the Home Depot Center in Carson. So this is where San Diego Chargers play football and where the Galaxy plays soccer. And what I'll do when I'm in that area at the end of the game, I won't go to the designated area, but there's like a huge neighborhoods all around because it's like right in the middle of this sort of semi-residential area. It's kind of weird, but people will request rides in the neighborhood and you still get that really good surge pricing. You swoop right in, grab them, and then you're out, right? It's like you never have to deal with any of that traffic and you can still get a lot of that surge. So that's definitely, a strategy that I use there. Kelly says, it's not all about the money. I go here the last 30 minutes of outdoor concerts, then take some folks home. Win-win. That's actually a great tip. I might do that myself one day. Pamela says, do any of you drive in less populated areas? If so, what do you average hourly? I think we just posted a good guest post on the site, but I think, typically most drivers, the average is around $16 to $17 per hour before expenses. That's what most drivers report earning. So I would suspect that less populated areas, less busy areas are going to be, probably 12 to 16 or 13 to 17 in that range. But, that just means that, maybe in a less populated area, you really have to focus more on the busiest times to drive, the Friday, Saturday nights, whenever there is a big event, a big concert or a holiday, for example, kind of understanding, right, with college being back in session these days, everyone's going back to school, Thursday nights is a big party night, all of that good stuff, really thinking about these strategies. Robert says, great chat again, Harry. Sam, I think he agrees with all my tips, so definitely appreciate that. And let's see, we're going to wrap up here. And in a second, Brett says, wow, I just logged in to Shop Your Way and I had $200 credit that I didn't even know of. Thanks, Harry. That's awesome. So I think I should say again, you guys should definitely go sign up for Shop Your Way because this is a pretty sweet program. And it's not often that you literally get free money for the stuff you're already doing, which is driving for Uber. And if you're a passenger, riding for Uber. So yeah, definitely take advantage of it. Lisa says, I average $24 an hour in a small town today. It requires lots of research to learn the areas and behavior. Yeah, I definitely agree. It's possible for sure. I think $20 to $25 an hour is a really good goal, for the smaller to medium markets. And I think if you're in a big market like LA and San Francisco, it's going to be a little bit higher. James says Christian is really helping Sears keep stay in business. And yeah, while Sears is still in business, we got to keep taking advantage of it. Louis says, what happened to Uberman? So, I saw Uberman. He's another good YouTube blogger. He's got a ton of great content on rideshare, but he has switched the focus of his channel to more of these. I think he's doing auto auction rebuilds. So kind of a niche topic, but it seems to be working well for him. So definitely kudos to Uberman. James says, baby rideshare guy is way better. He drives Uber Lux SUV. Bearded Uber guy says, hey, rideshare guy's a man. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. I think the bearded Uber guy, I think I might have been watching one of your videos the other day. So keep up the good content if that was you. And yeah, we've come to the end of the hour now. So I want to go ahead and do the giveaway. It's funny. It looks like 10 people dropped off in the last 5 minutes. I guess they really don't want the book, or maybe they already have it. So, why don't you, I think to enter to win this book right now, we're going to give away 3 copies tonight. And all you need to do is send me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com, with the subject line YouTube Live. And here's the key part. In the body of the email, I want you to give me your #1 tip for new drivers. If you could only tell a new driver one thing, what would it be? Would it be to not chase the surge? Would it be to follow the alcohol? Would it be to stay away from pukers? All right, don't use any of those 3 things that I just said, but come up with your own. Send me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com, subject line YouTube Live, and your #1 tip for new Uber, new Lyft drivers. And make it personal, make it specific, make it good. I'm going to read all of these and I want to be impressed. And I think I'm actually going to pick my 3 favorite ones. So it's not going to be random tonight like it usually is. I'm going to pick my 3 favorite ones. So make it good, make it interesting. Don't bore me, make it funny, whatever you have to do. And yeah, we'll be giving out a bunch of books. So appreciate you guys a ton for coming on. Thank you, Christian, for moderating in the comments. I don't think we had any trolls tonight that we had to ban or block or put on timeout or anything like that. But hopefully, Christian, you can get your audio and video fixed for next time. Let me know and we can upgrade that internet and we can get you back on here. Nina says, great chat, Harry. Love your emails and live chats. Awesome. I appreciate it. James, I think is this the James that I met in San Francisco, the guy who was joking with me? I think that was you. If not, let me know. But appreciate you guys all coming on. As mentioned, if you guys did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel too if you haven't already, and turn on notifications. That way, when we do release a new video, Tuesday, Thursday, every other Sunday, or most Sundays, and then when we go live on Tuesdays at 5 p.m., usually the same time every time, you'll get a notification. And that way you can make sure you jump on and ask me any questions that you might have a chance to win stuff. And it sounds like today everyone's going to be, syncing up their Shop Your Way accounts, and everyone's going to be buying flannels at Sears next month. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this. Oh, I forgot to say, send me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com. I think that was probably the most important part. If you guys do want to enter the contest for the book, send me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com, and then subject line YouTube Live. And in the body of the email, give me your #1 tip for new Uber drivers. I'm going to go ahead and pick 3 of my favorite responses, and we'll send you guys a brand new copy of my book. So definitely, that was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys got all of those instructions. And yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. I see a lot of similar names and a lot of new faces and names. So it's great. We're going to keep doing these every single month. Been doing them for almost 2 years and no signs of stopping. So appreciate you. I really appreciate you guys for joining, subscribing, and sticking with me for an hour. And until next month, definitely stay safe out there on the roads. And I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.